Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very, very enlightening session that's going to tell us about what we're doing with the journey to emancipation and beyond from a community perspective, from higher ed, and then from pre-K through 12. We're so happy to have all of you here today. I'm not Daryl Jones, and I didn't sleep at a Holiday Inn last night. Right, I didn't sleep last night. Long story. I am Dr. Michelle Gale. I'm Assistant Superintendent, Leon County Schools. Mr. Jones was called away for some city and county business. He should be here hopefully later on today, and I'm honored to serve in this role as your moderator. I want to introduce our panel, and then we'll get started with the great things that they have to tell us about what they're doing within their system, and more importantly, within our community and how it all works together. We have, starting off with the community, Gwyneth and Charles Parrish from the MLA Community Center in Monticello, Florida. We're happy to welcome them this morning. Let's give them a round of welcoming applause. We also have from the Florida A&M University, an associate professor of English at Florida A&M, Dr. Natalie King Podorso. Let's give her a round of applause. And then also from the Leon County School District, and I just have to brag again, we are one of 12 districts in the state of Florida who has exemplary status for African American history. We have our very own Susan Walden, and it would be so hard to describe what Susan does because she does some of everything, works with everybody. And also my marathon, half marathon buddy, I have to put that in. Just happy to have her here as well. Let's give her a round of applause. And of course, the audience, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Let me talk to you a little bit about how we're going to do things today. I want to ask everyone respectfully if you would put your phone on silence, please. I know everybody likes to stay connected, and of course, somebody needs somebody in this room, or all of you in this room right now. Okay, I can tell you that right now. But if you can please put your phone on silence to allow our panel to share and their experiences and such, I greatly appreciate that. If you do need to leave the room, for the restrooms, and the restrooms are right outside in the main building, we ask that you use this door over to my left, your right. We ask not to use the back doors because there's a session going on right behind us and the presenter is right up front. So again, if you could use the side door for the restrooms, we're all adults here, so if you could leave quietly and come back in quietly, we'd appreciate it. We're going to have each of our guests share 20 minutes of their perspective, and that's going to be hard because they could all talk the entire day and then some because they're passionate about this, just as we are. We're going to have them share 20 minutes to sort of give us an overview of what they have done, where they've come from, where they're going, different things of that nature, important things that they want to share, and there's so many important things to share. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers, and I'll come around with the mic so that, if you raise your hand, I'll ask you to come up. Watch the cords that are in the room. Please use caution. And if you need anything, we have someone in the back. Raise your hand so that we see you, so that if you need anything that maybe you can't get my attention because you're not paying attention or something like that, she'll be happy to help you. So with that being said, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Gwyneth and Charles Parrish. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to begin talking about emancipation and the types of activities and things that we do in Monticello, Florida. The understanding of emancipation is extremely important because it's not just Black history. It is American history. It's all of ours. And from that vantage point, we need to teach, we need to talk, we need to show that American spirit, because that is truly what it is. America was built on the back of Black men, women, and children. Emancipation was the day in Florida, May 20th, 1865, where they said, "We have been set free." Free. Free. What does that mean, freedom? What does that mean, emancipation? Well, in Monticello, Florida, what we have been doing at the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Center is to try to raise the awareness of what May 20th stands for. What is the history? What happened in Tallahassee, Leon County? What happened in Jefferson County? What happened in Madison County, where most of the slaves were? What happened? What did that feel like? What were the emotions that the people felt? What were the anxieties that people felt? And then, what are some of the things that before emancipation, what were some of the things that they went through? I would like to pull in some of the things I have here, and then that ties into some of the activities that we do at the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Center on May 20th. And then my husband will talk about how that came to be in Jefferson County, Monticello, Florida. First of all, I always like to anchor the children, the people, whoever I'm talking to, because I'm a retired educator. I like to anchor them and take them back. The cloth is African cloth. The giraffe and the little material right here, they're all African. That's the motherland. That's where most of the slaves came from. Not all, though. This is an international type of thing with slavery, which a lot of people don't understand. But sticking with the cloth, which is African, the material African, and the giraffe. Those are associations with the motherland. This is called a topsy-turvy doll. When the children, which were on the plantations, were there, and they were playing with their dolls, which they didn't have very many of. When the master would come, they would flip this doll and show this side. So they'd have a white baby. I'm a little girl. I want to carry my baby, okay? But if my master's around, this might be what I see.
What he was free.
When I'm home, when I'm playing, and I better be careful too. This is what I'm going to see. That dichotomy that is created within that young woman. The dichotomies. And that's what emancipation really is about, the dichotomies that are in the system. I need your help. Come. You can't say no. What do I mean by that? When mistress wanted something, and I worked in the big house, if I heard that bell, I need to come, right then and there. And as you can see, this bell has the antebellum dress. That's why I set this right here to show. There. And that's a reminder, okay? It's not about condemnation, it's about setting history straight and the types of things that did happen. It's about being aware of our history, and you cannot deny our history. This book, Heart and Soul, I highly recommend it because not only does it have beautiful pictures about just black history, but here again, it's American history, the kinds of things that happened. They have beautiful pictures that people can look at. The transatlantic crossing, to familiarize. There are songs also that go along with this book that talk about the feelings or how the slaves might have felt. This book, Slavery in Florida, is very factual. I'd like to pull different pieces out of that to share with older students, older people, so they can make those associations. Now, all this I would use or have used at the Dr. Martin Luther King Community Center when we celebrate May 20th. We also have a parade, which my husband will talk about later. The impetus for starting May 20th in Jefferson County, he will also talk about. But I would do the displays and do the setup and talk to people about what emancipation is, why it is important, how we can all share in getting the story out about May 20th, 1865. We make associations. The more information and knowledge that you have, you can build on that. And I believe it's everybody's responsibility to help further the knowledge of our American history. If we look at what's going on now, it's going to be, and it is, very difficult to communicate the truth of what has happened because a lot of people are trying to discount that. Does not make any difference. You can say the sun's not there also, but the sun is always there. So the truth of our history is there. We need to discover more of it. We need to understand more of it. And we need to share more of it. Charles?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to begin with the emancipation in Jefferson County. I was born and reared here in Tallahassee. And this area we are sitting in now is where I was born, known as Smoky Hollow. And I've seen a lot of things change in Tallahassee, and a lot of them remain the same. Although I don't live in Tallahassee now, we live in Lord, which is Jefferson County, the adjacent county to Leon. When I was in school in Leon County, I never heard of Emancipation Day in Leon County. Now, what they did with us as black people in Leon County, we had in May known as Field Day. That's when the black students at the black schools, because the school was segregated. We didn't have any dealing with the white schools, white people in the white schools. And that day we just didn't have class, just had activities all day. And that, now I wonder now why they didn't let us know it was Emancipation Day. So the black people in Tallahassee, as far as I know, we ain't celebrating no Emancipation Day. Now the people out in the countryside, like Mississippi and other outlying areas of the city, they celebrate it, but I don't remember the people in Tallahassee celebrating no Emancipation Day, because they didn't tell us nothing about it. So I read all this information that's been gathered up concerning Emancipation Day, but I'm 80 years old and born and reared here. I don't remember no Emancipation Day. All I remember Field Day in May, where they plant the maypole and all of that. But now I understand in the countryside they had it. But leaving here, going and moving to Jefferson County, over in Jefferson County, we have May 20th emancipation. We started about 15 to 20 years ago. We're the only county in the state where school is closed on that day. Now, the only reason we was able to get that day because we had to fight the school board. We asked them for the day and they said no, so we told them, well, since you don't want to give us that day, we'll just take that day. So we said we'll boycott the schools. So they found out that we were going to do that, and they decided to put it on the calendar for Emancipation Day. Now, the way we have it over there, it's not May 20th over in Jefferson County. It's the third Monday in May, regardless. Because, you know, May 20th, every year the day change. So that's why we celebrated the third Monday in May. In Jefferson County, we have a parade, and we have festivities, and we tried to get the school system, although they gave us the day off, but it's hard to get us to see we need to be off. Our students over there, we went over to the schools and presented some displays and tried to get them to put that in the curriculum, but it's not. Now, when I taught in Leon County, when I retired from Fairview Middle School, now we used to, in my class, especially on Black History Month, which that is fading out too. Mm-hmm. And this so-called Black History in the curriculum, that's a lie. Florida never taught that. It's never been taught in the schools in Florida, not in Leon County. Now, I don't know what they're doing now, but when I was teaching, we didn't teach that wasn't part of the curriculum. Now, it's supposed to have been part of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of other stuff was said supposed to be done, but it wasn't done, and still is. So we're having a problem, the way I see it, we're having a problem getting the information out to our people. And I say our people, I'm not talking about just black people, I'm talking about all of the people. Mm-hmm. Now, Emancipation Day is supposed to be a day that the slaves were freed. Now, in Leon County, May 20th is when at the Knoxville, at the North House, the Emancipation was read. Mm-hmm. Now, every state got a different day for the emancipation. Mm-hmm. But now I don't know why Congress just passed a bill into law making Juneteenth Emancipation Day. But that's not for us, that's for people in Texas. Mm-hmm. So why should we give up our Freedom Day to celebrate Juneteenth for Texas? although it should be a national holiday. But look at the day they set it on. They set it on a Sunday. Well, that ain't no national holiday if it's on a Sunday.
That's true.
That's the day the people go to church in America, on Sunday. There ain't no holiday. So there again, you shortchanging the people. Why couldn't it be like a national holiday on a Monday like every other holiday? But they put it on Sunday. And we went along with it. We shouldn't have gone along with it, as far as I'm concerned. Now, as far as we're concerned in Jefferson County, we're going to have our celebration on May 20th in Jefferson County. And we're going to have our parade. We're making preparation now for our parade and things pertaining to Jefferson County 20th of May. And we're also trying to get our school. Now, we're the only school in the state that's not operated by the county school board. Somerset school system operates Jefferson County School, which is only one school in the county. That's elementary through high school. Now, I understand that they're going to give that back to the school board for next year. But hopefully we could get them to, well, we can get the school board to continue, because they granted us that strength of May Day. And hopefully that we will continue, they will continue once they get it back, giving it to us. Now, the reason why we celebrated on the third Monday in May, because when we went before the school board, asked for a day, school board member was telling me about, well, you know, the students got to be tested. I said, well, maybe let's get something clear now. And you know, we don't do nothing in the school educational around the last of school. We don't do nothing but just take attendance. We don't teach nothing. So you're going to tell me we can't be off because of testing? No. You don't do nothing. We're just there. So they realized what we were saying and eventually gave us that day. And that's why it always falls on the third Monday of May. And we try to get, we're still working on the curriculum, trying to get the school students to participate. Now, when I retired from Fairview, and I was telling my students, when we would have Black History Month, and I would talk about May 20th, the emancipation during that period, and also told my students now, Black history is a part of American history. You can't separate it out. Now, what is happening today, they're trying to eliminate some of the things that happened. Now, we got to be Americans and understand it, the good and the bad, the ugly and the pretty, whatever you want to call it. You're not going to have a history unless you teach it as it was. And all my philosophy has been, if you don't know your history, you have a tendency to repeat it. And that's what's happening with America today.
That's a great closing thought. And like I said, the parishes, and I know with the entire panel, they could go on for hours, and you'll get a chance to share more. We appreciate what you have shared, and I know I have some questions. I can't wait until we get to the question and answer part of it. We're
I used
going
to work for her.
Work with me. Work with me. And
At Griffin Middle School.
you'll be happy to know that Mr. Zapata, he is now one of the administrators at Fairview Middle School.
And also want to extend an invitation, you know, we have a
Yeah.
We used to do,
ground, so anytime you want to come by, please.
we used to do a presentation at Fairview and
Mrs. Lyons, through the Media Center.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Penholster
All
was
right. I
was
love
the
it.
principal at that time.
I love it. I love it. Now we're going to go to higher ed with Dr. Natalie King Pedroso, who is an associate professor of English at Florida A&M University. And I'll turn it over to you for 20 minutes. And I know you
Thank
could
you,
go
Dr.
on,
Gill.
but just
Yes,
whet our
easily.
appetite a little bit.
Okay, let me go ahead and wet it for you. Okay, quote, "It is indicative of the cosmology, the way in which Black people looked at the world. We are very practical people, very down to earth, even shrewd people. But within that practicality, we also accepted what I suppose could be called superstition, magic, which is another way of knowing things. But to blend those two worlds together at the same time was enhancing, not limiting. And some of those things were discredited knowledge that Black people had, discredited only because Black people were discredited. Therefore, what they knew was discredited. And also because the press toward upward mobility would mean to get as far away from that kind of knowledge as possible. That kind of knowledge has a very strong place in my work," end quote. And that excerpt is from the amazing Toni Morrison's essay, Rootedness, the Ancestor as Foundation. And good morning, you know, I'm happy to be here, proud, this inaugural gathering to discuss emancipation in the state of Florida. And my little contribution today is related to our work at Florida A&M University. And the title of my presentation, Journey to Emancipation and Beyond, Florida A&M University Spring Literary Forum and Methods for Teaching Afro-Southern Literature. And there at FAMU, when we focus, again, on the Afro-South in literature, and specifically with our Spring Literary Forum, you know, what I began to note, not just at FAMU, because I used to teach at a PWI, a downstate, a predominantly white institution. And there, a number of our students, and it didn't matter, I noted were having very strong ancestral ties to communities in the South, to the Caribbean, and Latin America. And with those discussions we began to have in class, and specifically, I'm looking at Antonio Benitez Rojo's theory of the plantation. That's why you see the capital P and lowercase p, because in his presentation, when he talks about the plantation, the lowercase p, and I would ask my students, I said, okay now, you know, many of you talk to me about your heritage, your roots. If I talk about the plantation system and those cash crops, and the lowercase p is a reference to the agricultural system, the production of those cash crops, name them for me. And they would cotton, sugar, you know, indigo, and they'd be able to recall. But the capital P is tied to a system of hierarchy, social hierarchy, that was the byproduct of the production and sale of those cash crops. So that kind of sits at one point in our discussions. And with that, finding the diversity, you know, found in these discussions and with these students, a fertile ground for even other talks, because, and again, as the parish has stated, this is, it's a shared experience. It is a shared heritage. This is American history as well. The Spring Literary Forum began in 2009, and it began as, again, a teen teaching activity. It has now become a signature event at Florida A&M University, I'm proud to say. And as stated, each year we focus on some aspect of the Afro-South. And let me pause. When I say Afro-South, I feel many times when we talk about the South, somehow the Black experience is removed, okay, from that. as you stated, Ms. Parrish, we built the South. We've been here hundreds of years. And with that appellation, reclaiming that association and those contributions. So again, the Afro-Southern world, again, some aspect. Our transdisciplinary approach to analyzing the South provides students with opportunities to expand their worldviews and address the layers inherent in the text. And I am an English instructor, so we're talking about those poems, those novels, those short stories, those essays, and perspective. Again, opening their eyes to something new, and ideally, exposure. Exposure, again, functions as an exemplary tool of instruction, and that exposure, if possible, and I know with COVID it's a little difficult, but what I provided later in my presentation is, two different examples. On-site visits, and I used to teach downstate as stated, but with the movement, back to North Florida, I was amazed by all of the tools. I call them, this is a huge lab as far as I'm concerned, and there's so much that can be utilized to promote these investigations. FAMU's mission statement, and again, an 1890 land grant institution, and I give information about our background and everything we aim to do to again make our students productive citizens, and they're absolutely amazing. Some of the most brilliant people I've ever worked with. I also want to note FAMU's unique heritage. If we talk about the state university system and understanding our university, founded in 1887 to educate the children of freedmen and freed women. And my great-grandmother was born in 1887, and my father raised by her. And it's interesting, a lot of the retentions from a different time, he still has right there on the tip of his tongue. But that also is why this is important, because it is personal. This story is personal, but it's a story is stated for everyone. Beyond that, what I've done is I've kind of given you, because students, a few of us faculty members talked, and we stated, well, I'm teaching Toni Morrison, and you're teaching Toni Morrison, and I know there's one approach I'm using when I share with my students, and I'm sure there's another approach. Why don't we get together? Mm-hmm. And in that team teaching activity, my students get a chance to hear your perspectives, and your students hear mine. And initially, it started as a few professors together. Then we reached out to our friends at Florida State University, and they would also come to campus and engage in these discussions. And then we said, well, let's try to find a little money to bring some other folks to campus. And when we did that, and many of these people are folks you've actually heard of. Dr. Bernard Bell, who is, if you talk about studies related to the African American novel, he's an icon. Tananarive Due, novelist, and specifically, if you're talking about Black speculative fiction, Walter Mosley, and many of you have read Walter Mosley's work. Ibram Kendi, a recent MacArthur Genius Award winner and FAMU alum, also visited us. Dr. Joanne Braxton, and I love her amazing outraged mother theory. I'm working with our students there. Attorney John Dew, a civil rights icon in the state of Florida. Miss Shirley Sherrod, and a few years ago, there was a dust up, I guess with the USDA, where she was wrongfully accused of some issues, and specifically this matter of racism and bigotry, and to learn later that it wasn't true at all, but by then it was a big mess. But to bring her to campus, Dr. Patrick Mason, who you happened to hear in the documentary last evening, Dr. Larry Rivers as well, and again, all of these people have come to campus. The amazing Natasha Tretheway, and I'll spend a little bit more time with her in a moment, and Monifa Love, another poet. Dr. William R. Jones, he's gone now, but again, his theories on race. Dr. Maxine Montgomery at FSU, Dr. Geraldine McGregory, And these are only a few. Clinton Bird, and Clinton Bird right now owns the Montague Collection, and let me explain the value of that. For him to come to campus and for him to place in the hand of my student a first edition copy of Frederick Douglass's slave narrative. Okay, how powerful, powerful. So again, these are the experiences we're sharing with our students. And you see the different years, Toni Morrison, Ernest Gaines, Gloria Naylor, and then we started getting fancy, okay, with the titles. A Florida Legend, Visions of Zora Neale Hurston in the 21st Century, that movement lifting as we climb, celebrating the lives and works of James Weldon Johnson and Augusta Savage from Florida. And Augusta Savage, whether people know it or not, at one time also attended FAMU. The African American novel, text and context, Black to the Future. Again, her foray into Black speculative fiction, and we have another Black to the Future too later. Afro-Retroism, African American Women and the American South. And I believe that's the year Nikki Finney and Bree Newsome came to campus to meet with her students. Song of the Afro-South, Intersections and Connections. We built this, all right? Storytellers and culture bearers, and again, Black to the Future too, and Toni Morrison, and upon her passing, we said we must talk about this amazing culture bearer and her work. And Elwood's Tallahassee, and in a minute or two, I'll talk more about it. And as we look ahead to 2022, Music Authority and Racial Identity. The amazing Donnie Walton is coming to our campus, and Donnie Walton has published a novel to great acclaim. And when you go in later, Google Donnie Walton and NPR, you'll hear the interview with Terry Gross. Donnie Walton is from Jacksonville. She used to be one of the, I guess, co-editors at Essence Magazine, and Donnie Walton is also a FAMU alum. So again, but this is important for our students as well, to make them know, and bringing her back to campus and bringing Ibram Kendi back to campus, that legacy, you are connected to it, and this issue of greatness. You can do whatever you want to do coming from here, what we have to give you. And just a few pictures. Walter Mosley there in FAMU's Black Archives with a few people. That's Nikki Finney. And if you want another treat, look up her acceptance speech for the National Book Award. Oh my God, okay, it is a lecture in itself about the African American presence in the United States, and specifically those voices related to the Afro-South and what they signify. And if you didn't know who Bree Newsome was, this picture, I'm sure that kind of jars your memory. And this was put together by a student. Bree is free, okay, to bring folks to campus. And I mean, she had a full house as a result, and a wonderful presentation. And again, Priscilla Stevens-Kreitzer, and she's important to you because along with her sister, Patricia Stevens-Dew, who passed away as of February 10 years ago, and her husband, again, John Dew, they're three of the most important civil rights icons in the state of Florida. And right there at the same table, you have her, you have Miss Sherrod, you have Charles Sherrod. And if you're talking about Albany and the civil rights movement, you're talking about that couple. So again, history, and for students to have that type of access to history and what it signifies here. Andrew Frank, a great deal of amazing work if we're talking about a Native American presence here. So, again, exposure, that word I used previously, and, expanding worldviews. And again, our own Ibram Kendi. And when I start talking to students in the classroom, and, I don't care if I'm teaching Flannery O'Connor, William Faulkner, or Toni Morrison. And yes, she was born in Ohio, but many of us teach her as a Southern writer because her parents are from Georgia and Alabama, and those sensibilities we find in her work. But when we talk about those themes that we tie to a Southern sensibility, land, and we know land is tied to identity if we're talking about the South. And I could go on. That's a lecture in itself, okay? And in the South, manners, still in many places, mean a great deal. The sheer fact if you roll in somewhere and someone is an elder, you better not call them by the first name, okay? You know, things like that. And even an elder who is, if you talk about by blood tie, your cousin, that's your aunt. So again, a lot of this, and I love it because even as folk cultures later on the list, when I ask my students, I say, okay, right now someone tell me, and especially with Toni Morrison because her narratives are rigorous, but I stated if you read Rootedness, you get Morrison. But if I ask you this question, if you dreamed of fish last night, what does that mean? All right. What is it? Go ahead and tell us. What does it mean if you dreamed of fish last night? Someone is pregnant. Someone is pregnant. And I said, students, y'all are laughing, but what you need to understand, there's a certain access that you have to Toni Morrison that professors at Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, and Yale, lack, because she is dwelling there in her narrative, all right? So again, folk culture and family, who your people? Because that's oftentimes a question folks ask in the South as soon as they meet you. And that's significant, your connections that way. The community, how are you connected to the community? And being part of something larger than yourself is significant. Religion is important in the South, and folks, I want us to understand when I say religion, I'm not just talking about Christianity. There are many layers here, many layers. Sadly, violence. If we're talking about the American South, and some would even say the somewhat even psychic South beyond the borders of the American South, and some things we're even seeing now. Because that legacy, history is a character in our narratives if we're talking about Southern literature, Afro-Southern literature. Foodways. I know, and we were reading Zora Neale Hurston's, one of her short stories, come to me. And with it, she mentioned corn pone, sweet potato pone, buttermilk, and foodways, the production of certain foods, the presentation of those foods, what is consumed. It all means a great deal if you're talking about the South. Do you know her mother made us a sweet potato pone and sent it to class? Okay. But like I said, this type of engagement, this is a sweet potato pone. Oral tradition, and this matter of passing information down by word of mouth, the preservation. And we know that comes from a heritage across the water, and again, a number of those residuals, those retentions, we are finding here, including that tied to the land and what that signifies. But oral tradition, I told my students, please tell me, what does that mean? Tell me, what does it mean? Legends, stories. I said, liturgy, sermonic tradition. I said, folks, little Sally Walker, sing around, so all of that, games, and gossip, even. Gossip, because people are transferring information when they do that. We don't like it, but, that's part of the story. And again, under that umbrella of folk culture, and the South race was and still is an important issue. The first novel, as Ernest Gaines is of Love and Dust, and taught in an ENC 1102 class, my objective with it, literary analysis of his novel. Students should be able to engage, again, in deep oral and written analyses of that text. Our format, lecture discussion, approach, examination of novel, again, text and context, and great support from the Spring Lit Forum, and I'll explain how. And I posted the evaluation or methods that we used there. Beyond that, Ernest Gaines, and sadly we just lost him recently, was a Louisiana treasure, a state of Louisiana treasure, a national treasure, and his narratives deal a great deal or addressing that folk community and other communities, but that folk community there in Louisiana sits at the center with a lot of the themes that I just noted a few minutes ago. And that particular year, we had, as stated, the amazing Natasha Tretheway, a former U.S. Poet Laureate, come to campus. A standing room only audience is what she found before her. I'm proud to say Mayor Booker Gaynor in Cairo, Georgia, and he's currently the mayor again, and a FAMU alum, and that's Clinton Bird. I mentioned the Montague Collection, and folks, if you ever have access, I mean, it will blow your mind what you find there. But here is Natasha Tretheway again, and some of her achievements, and I don't know, we don't have time, but I also had here her reciting the poem Enlightenment, and that double entendre, when we hear the word enlightenment, we're thinking of the age, of reason and the like and everything that comes with it. You're thinking of Thomas Jefferson and his function in that sphere. But what she's also referring to in that poem, because the first person narrator in the poem has gone to Monticello with her father, and Natasha Tretheway is mixed race, and her father's white. And his perspective of what he sees at Monticello is very different from hers. So this idea of a revelation of sorts that occurs there is the reference to the double entendre or double meaning, in the title. And this is Tretheway reciting it. It's a mind-blowing poem if you ever have a chance to view it. Now, what we did is Tretheway again talked a great deal about the South in her poetry, and that was in February. In April, and I was shocked, one Saturday morning, we just sent a notice out, whoever's interested, students and whomever, because we know you're prepping for other things, come join us. And a bus was waiting for them behind the Black Archives at Florida A&M University. We filled that bus, and we are not in Louisiana, but we created Louisiana, Gaines's Louisiana, in southern Georgia, in Plains and Sylvester. And my objective was to find a locale that had a commissary. And because if we talk about the commissary, and specifically, and with Gaines, again, this idea that we see in this novel, is that slavery is over, but is it really? Okay, is it really? And from a description of the narrative at the beginning, if you didn't see that truck there, you'd have sworn that it was in the middle of the 19th century, but it's actually taking place in 1948, so it's shocking, the things that we see in that particular community. But what we did to kind of help students prime the pump right here was to take them to a farm-to-table event. And there, they had an opportunity to go to Plains and to see that commissary, because there's so much that happens there. And a lot of it, if we talk about slavery by another name, Blackman, and with it, we viewed the documentary on our way in to kind of get their heads ready for, sharecropping and how sharecroppers were kept there forever on those sites because they could not afford to leave once they used their credit to make purchases at the commissary. And this is at President Carter's Boyhood Home. I'm integrating art and an interesting 4-H program, and I'll talk more about that later in the Q&A. And it's beautiful because students had an opportunity to engage in a discussion with Black farmers in Sylvester so they could understand maybe some things they did not if you're talking about agriculture and the novel. So when I stated transdisciplinary, technology, agriculture, literature, history, art, all of that exposure. The second novel, Colson Whitehead's The Nickel Boys, for my African American 2 novel class, and those are our aims and our 13th annual. And this is Colson Whitehead. Colson Whitehead actually is coming to FSU's opening nights in February, and National Book Award recipient, Pulitzer Prize winner, MacArthur Genius Award winner. And this statement, we are privileged to discuss the work with a setting in our own backyard, Tallahassee, Frenchtown, on a location that resembles Mariana's Dozier School for Boys. This year, Florida A&M University's 13th annual Spring Literary Forum situates The Nickel Boys, an award-winning novel, Throughout the novel, Whitehead presents Elwood's world. Elwood is our protagonist, and his fictionalized account of Black Tallahassee and the Dozier School for Boys. And again, for us, a unique opportunity, because many students are on campus and they never leave. We want you to know something about Tallahassee, and specifically Black Tallahassee. And this is the actual program of Frenchtown, one session, Emancipation Day. And he only mentions Emancipation Day briefly in the novel. However, we said, let's take this opportunity, because sometimes you have to do that, to expose our students to May 20th and what that signifies. The Jim Crow South and FAMU civil rights legacy, and some of the people I mentioned previously, you heard them, and generational reflections from the Brickler family. Here you have 2 pictures, and these 2 gentlemen were actually students at the notorious Dozier School for Boys. And students had an opportunity, and other guests there, to hear their story about their experience. And here is an assignment, and I know we're pressed for time. I will go back later and talk about what this meant to students and our conclusion, the aims, and what our students want and what they need. The forum exposed them to unlimited approaches to thinking critically about these texts, and guests and experiences provided them fresh perspectives as they considered their novels, text and context, and writing assignments and class discussions, and they were far richer after these experiences. And during these gatherings, our students gained access to these important icons. And my shameless plug, please join us in February when Donnie Walton comes to campus. Okay, thank you very much.
Wow. Between the parishes and Doc and wow, I'm just taking notes like I'm in a class right now. I see everybody else doing the same thing. We're going to end the overview with Susan Walden talking about what we're doing in Leon County. I do want to say that Clint Bird used to be an employee of Leon County Schools. Yes, he used to be an employee of Leon County Schools. So yes, we can get in touch with him. He's talked to us before about the Montague collection. Mr. Parrish, I think you will be pleased with some of the things that Ms. Walden is going to bring to light about how we're trying to move forward and what we had to do to prove what we're doing. So I know he's listening very intently. He's very passionate, as is everyone on this panel and everyone in the room. So with no further ado, Susan, being the flexible person that she is going to go forward and share all the great things that we have been doing. Let's welcome Ms. Walden.
Thank you. So I want to start by saying that a lot of the materials that I'm talking about are currently housed in Canvas, which is our student platform new to the district-wide student population last year as a measure that we took as part of COVID-19 response. I do have access. We had some technical difficulty pulling that up, but that's okay, because I think what we really want to talk about is sort of the story of this work, how it began, and then where it's going, because just to acknowledge what Mr. Parrish talked about and what we all know, my team that's here with me today, is it's work that's just beginning, even though there's been, we'll talk a little bit about some of the statutes and requirements and things like that. As everything in the pre-K-12 school system, there's still more work to be done. That's one of the beauties and the points of exhaustion of working in education, right? But, and so if you are interested in viewing the Canvas portal to look at this, I can give you some guest access to it later if we talk about, or I will have the materials pulled up right here as well. But just to sort of start this story and acknowledge something very important, and they don't expect me to do this, but I want to talk about how it's not a story that started just with me. It's a story that really was a team effort to begin this initiative last year and had its roots in some work that many people in this room have been doing for many years. And so just really quickly, I want to mention that we have our language arts developers and reading developers for Leon County Schools here, Miss O'Reilly and Miss Winsett. And they are my ever wonderful proofreaders. And they help, we're going to talk about some lessons that were crafted, and they've been really, really helpful in commenting from the language arts perspective on sort of the value, the instructional approaches, the pedagogical approaches that we took in initiating the design of these lessons. Ms. Winsett was a big part of that last year. Ms. O'Reilly is new to our team this year, but I'm going to talk about some of the roots of one of the pieces that was incorporated into these lessons that actually started back when she and I were colleagues at Rickards High School, along with Mr. Zapata. And so they are part of the team that's here. We actually have Ms. Tanya Givens here, who is our secondary social studies curriculum developer, who assisted in the same vein. He wasn't able to be here today, but Mr. Brian Lassiter, our elementary social studies developer, contributed as well. And then Mr. Zapata, like I said, he not only was a colleague of mine when we worked together at Rickards High School, but he actually did made a lot of contributions in his role as a history teacher and as a district representative for social studies and history to gaining our exemplar status as a district in African American history. Ms. Titsy is here, and she works with our beginning teachers, but also assists with a program called Blended Lives that does tours of the Riley House and the Goodwood House for our 4th grade students. Again, COVID has given us some interesting challenges with field trips. She has done a wonderful job working with them to sort of make some positives out of that. And so she's actually a big part of the future work of this, and that some of the local history we do plan to add on to the initial base lessons is going to come from some work that we're doing this year in light of COVID and the inability to do a full-scale field trip, but we're doing some online lessons with the Riley House as well. And then Miss Felicia Nicholson is here. And I think one of my favorite parts about these lessons is that Miss Nicholson is a Tallahassee native, and she has family members who are deeply rooted in the traditions of the Emancipation Day celebration. And when we started with this project last year, one of the first things she did was said, I have documents, I have stories, I have everything. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is that pedagogically, we wanted this curriculum to be implemented where it could in all grade levels. And so we looked to take the same basic structure of lessons, the same basic texts, and adapt them across grade levels, not only to ensure an equitable baseline of experience for students no matter what grade they were in, but also to make sure that we had good examples of that personal, rich storytelling that we know is good pedagogy in history, as well as language arts. And so there's actually a text in our set that was contributed by Ms. Nicholson herself, talking about her perspective with Emancipation Day celebrations that we were able to adapt for our different ages of students. And we have a sort of resource library with some documents that she contributed from her family and from their involvement as well. And then, of course, we have Dr. Gale and we have Heather Thomas here, and they are a big part of our communications team. Dr. Gale and her work actually was what sort of started our work just last year with these in-depth online lessons for the recognition of Emancipation Day. And Ms. Thomas is also excellent always when I need to get the word out. Her work is in communications. She's an excellent help with that. So it was really important for me to start by telling you about how many people were involved in this, because it's not something I could have ever done alone. And I am, in my work with this, among other things, doing the job of pulling together as many experiences with local history and experiences with Emancipation Day as possible, because we know that's really what helps our students and our children see themselves in the history. When this project was first brought to us, I think it was January of last year. We had some discussion. It was Dr. Gale, it was my supervisor, Mr. Seifert, and then Ms. Althoria Pickett, who isn't able to be here today, but she is our required instruction coordinator for the district. We had some discussion about how we would approach recognizing something in our schools to coincide with the Leon County recognition, the city recognition of Emancipation Day. And we started thinking about that maybe there were some curricular lessons we could disseminate, we could embed, but in light of that, it was still the challenge of, well, but it's COVID year. How are we going to get this out? We can't go into every classroom in the district and teach this ourselves. But we were also going through an interesting experiment in the PK-12 system called online learning. And so, and an experiment is not over, yes, but we're getting better all the time. And so what we collectively decided to do was to find a way to create this curriculum, these suggested materials and resources in a manner that was age and grade level appropriate for our students, and that would allow as many stories and experiences, starting with Emancipation Day and its history in Tallahassee as much as possible, into the classroom in a way that teachers and instructors could sort of adapt to fit their own instructional style, as well as in a way that would allow them to pace it out and incorporate it into their curriculum in a meaningful way. Because that was the other thing we were concerned about. We didn't want it to be sort of a one and done, here's some resources, have fun, We wanted it to be a part of a larger conversation. And so I, as someone who had some experience with Canvas in several of my roles in Leon County and otherwise, sort of took the lead, volunteered to take the lead on putting the resources that we could pull together into Canvas. One of my personal starting points was to think, number one, about the pedagogical approach to this, because it felt like a big task to be done in a very short period of time. And I reflected a lot on the way that I first learned about African American history in my youth. I'm from a small town in the Panhandle in Walton County, and I remember a lot of stories being shared. It wasn't necessarily through my school curriculum, because as Mr. Parrish pointed out, even though it's probably been there, laws that say we should teach this, I, too, had the honest experience of, I don't know that it was ever fully taught the way that it was, in a way that was meaningful. A lot of my education came from stories in the community, stories of people in the community. In our community, I don't know if you've ever heard of Gladys Milton. She was a midwife, and she ran a birthing center right in this tiny rural town in Florida, in northern Walton County, basically Alabama. I remember she used to come to the school, and some of her students were in my father's math class, and she would tell stories about her practice. Of course, her midwifery practice was rooted in the fact that, hospitals in that area in that time were not integrated, so someone had to learn to do it. That was honestly, I think, one of the first things when I did the soul searching to start this work that made me think about. A lot of it was this personal, untapped, and maybe sometimes unheard of, even though she had had in her lifetime, she passed in, I think, the late 90s, several national medical awards, actually, for the work that she did, because it began to be recognized after integration of the hospitals. But just little stories like that exist everywhere, but that have such a meaning in local history that a student who does not, come from that background. Those stories were not necessarily disseminated in my school curriculum, but it made it to me through sort of the personal history, the word of mouth. And so that was honestly the thread of pulling this all together that started the work. Years earlier as well, I first learned about Emancipation Day in Tallahassee about May 20th. As a reading coach at Rickards High School, we were doing these lessons, and my colleagues may remember them, the resource lessons that we used to do. We were transitioning to the new Florida standards for curriculum at that time. And one of the things I did as a reading coach was we did sort of campus-wide lessons for about 20 minutes a day. Every classroom would be covering the same lesson, and it would be a text set with some discussion questions with it. And during Black History Month, our administrators at the time, Mr. Cook, suggested that we try and focus in on some local Black history. And so one of the texts I remembered pulling for that in doing my own research, working on those lessons and having colleagues preview them and help me with those, was a personal narrative of taken from a book of local historical primary texts about a adult reflecting on her experiences as a young girl in the May 20th festivities in Tallahassee. And she would talk about how the family would gather and they'd cook a meal, and it was just that very personal account of how she celebrated that we could then tie out to other texts about the history of emancipation. That is honestly where Miss Nicholson comes in, because that account was about 80 years old at that time. And so that was sort of my starting point, the easily accessible piece for me to begin pulling into these lessons to tell this story of emancipation in Tallahassee. And when Miss Nicholson saw that, she said, we decided that she could create the, nearly 100 years later version of that text, about a young girl growing up in modern times, and that would be a really good connection for our students. And honestly, from there, it began to grow. And so we have, I want to say, around 10 resources in each module. There's a module by grade band. There's a K2, a 3-5, a 6-8, and a 9-12 module where we just took the same resources and made them more complex and made the activities that accompany them more complex as the grade levels go up. We accompanied them with outside videos, resources that people from our team were able to help us to find, and put them in sort of that storytelling logical progression within our Canvas system. We knew there was still another piece, though, that was going to be critical to this, and that was communicating our pedagogical approach and perspective and intention to our teachers. So step one in that was, again, I knew that just because I had, programmed the things into Canvas, that couldn't be the end of it. And so I called on my friends once again to preview those lessons in Canvas. And so we made them students. And they, before the lessons went out to our faculty across the district, they took the time to go through them. They gave me feedback. We had several meetings where we could make adjustments, bring their lens of expertise into it. And one of the really beneficial things that came out of that was the idea that if we really wanted this to be something that was meaningful to all teachers, we needed to give them the tools and the loud and clear message that within the lines of accuracy, there's flexibility to this and its use. And so they helped me to put together an introductory module that is really sort of a keynote to the instructors using these materials, that if their personal experience is that they haven't taught history like this before, there are lots of good resources out there that we've linked into Canvas for teaching hard history, because we didn't want, while we wanted to keep everything age appropriate, we didn't want to sanitize anything, to the point where it wasn't telling accurate history. There's a really good resource that we put in there that I like called Teaching Hard History from the Southern Poverty Law Center, that serves as a good piece of professional development for teachers trying to implement a curriculum like this if they don't have that experience. I think we have some plans to continue to use that in other forms in the near future as well. And there were also some pieces of lessons or ideas or suggestions of other things that could be done on the campus to extend this, because the best learning not only comes from that story-oriented perspective experience, but it also comes from tangible experiences as well. And so there's a section of that front piece of the module for educators that talks about ways that you can really bring this to life. As I said, we were still working through how do we do this online teaching thing because we haven't done it before. And so we wanted to make sure educators knew that, you know, the good thing is you can project this on the screen. It's got artwork, it's got videos, but that doesn't mean that it's sit and get for the students. They need to actually interact with the history, with the works. And so that front document to me really made the difference in this, and we had some really good reception to that. The lessons, after we did our preview, they went into Canvas, what's called Canvas Commons. And it's sort of like a OneDrive or cloud storage where you can mark it for access to anybody to pull into their Canvas course. And so we advertised it to Leon County Schools. We made sure that all of our stakeholders knew that it was occurring. We made sure all our teachers knew how to access it. Because again, technology in itself can be a challenge. I am happy to say that at each grade level, the modules were pulled into Canvas. I think the last time I looked at the data, over 300 times, which means it was reaching most courses in some way, okay? And we have plans to continue that work this year as well. And while there is the required instruction law, if you like statutes and numbers, it's 1003.42. But it honestly, and it mentions, I think in section 2, parens I, I think it mentions, that we should be, as a part of required instruction, teaching African American history. There was, I believe, Bill 1213 that talked about the Ocoee Massacre in Florida about 2 years ago. And there's supposed to be specific curriculum coming out to address that from the Commissioner's Task Force on African American History. But to Mr. Parrish's point earlier, we have plans to keep this alive, keep it going, and hopefully enrich it, make it deeper. The beauty of Canvas is that, and the reason I say that at last count of the number of times it's been downloaded, it's a resource that can kind of live online and be updated in a permanent status. And so it doesn't have to just happen on May 20th. It can keep that spirit of teaching this alive year round. We have plans to hopefully, granted COVID has been more of a challenge this year, truthfully, than I think we had originally anticipated. But we do have plans to branch out from these lessons that we have kind of as a solid base and as a model. I think one day we do hope to bring an even larger team of teachers in to contribute to these lessons as they grow and as we add to them, because we certainly don't want it to just stay here either and be a static, unchanging resource. It should grow and be dynamic and evolve over time. And then I would say finally, it's interesting the other pockets of work that we can connect this to. Because as I said, the Riley House, we're going to be doing some work, Jessica and I, with them to extend the format of these lessons into something that can kind of take place of that field trip again this year, but that in the long run, in the future, may be used in conjunction with the traditional blended lives field trip that we do. So that's just a little bit about, I think, an overview of how these lessons came to be, the purpose of them, and really our desires for what they will be in the future to bring some more light to these issues that are really necessary, and they're a part of all of our history, especially here in Tallahassee. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Before I open it up for questions and answers, I do want to say something, Ms. Walden. Looking at the emancipation and making sure that history was taught so that we not moved away from Juneteenth, but made sure that our students understood it. That was brought about by the superintendent. Also, now school board chair Daryl Jones, and also at the time she was chair Joy Bowen, and all of the members, but I do have to say that. And it was a challenge especially during COVID. I mean, but we thought it important enough not to kick the can, not to make an excuse, we can't do this right now because we don't have optimal teaching conditions, and move forward. And thank you and everyone else who contributed, because you're definitely leaders, and the task was out there and you started working very hard on it. I do want to also say, and this is a point that Mr. Parrish brought up with Jefferson County, the third Monday of May is celebrated for Emancipation Day in Jefferson County, where kids don't go to school. We had the discussion about Emancipation Day. Should we use that instead of, I work with a lot of people to develop the calendar for Leon County schools, but we made a conscious decision not to take Emancipation Day as a holiday. We wanted the kids to be in school so that lessons that these great educators and those who aren't even sitting in the room, as we, continue to build on them, they would be exposed to those lessons during Emancipation Day. Okay, so that's something that we discussed, the board discussed, and gave the directive, talked to teachers, administrators, and such. And so that's why in Leon County, we will continue to come to school during that day. So I wanted to bring that to light. Wow, now it's time for questions and answers. I have a list, but I'm not going to be selfish. I'm going to let our audience, I heard your comments during the time that all of our presenters were talking, and I know that you have many questions and answers. This does go a bit far. I may have to ask you to step up, but at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions and answers of this very knowledgeable, passionate panel of people that we have. Don't be shy.
Dr. Gale, would I be allowed
Yes,
to
ma'am.
make a quick statement first?
Of course.
Ms. Winsett, I see you hiding back there. That is one of the best English instructors in Leon County. She taught both my daughters.
Yes, she is.
She's absolutely
Yes, she
amazing.
is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. Yes, she is. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Questions? Yes, let me get the mic to you. That would be
I have a question for the Leon County school system. I guess I have to qualify the question. I do Frederick Douglass, and I've done presentations on the school levels from like junior high school, and I also done Civil War roundtables with grown people. And I've done community events, festivals, and so on. Question I had about teaching hard history, so to speak. Do you have any idea what type of response you get from the children? Maybe you don't have what you'd like to have because of COVID this year. But I wondered how is that going over? Because I can share a couple of things that I think I learned that might be interesting for you. Can you?
Sure.
Did everybody hear that? Everybody's okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Go
and just to
ahead.
kind of recap and to make sure I understand, you're asking kind of what have been our experiences in that teaching hard history with students, right? And what their reactions, interactions, level of engagement would be? Yes.
I'd say something that's kind of funny. I did a presentation. I don't want to embarrass myself because I forgot the name of the school. It's the one that's out off of Highway 20.
Fort Braden?
No, in town. Oh my goodness.
Was it elementary, high school?
No, it was alternative school.
Gasvini, Success
Gasvini,
Academy.
Yeah.
Success Academy. Yes,
They
sir.
made me sign an insurance policy. They called it, consider me a vendor. I guess it's technically the way you had to do things when you represent them. But I said, okay, it's junior high school. And they told me that generally the type of students were there, second chance type students. And I said, well, maybe they think I might start a riot if I go in there. And that's kind of funny, but I understood that. One of the things I learned is the very first thing, and I don't want to steal the mic, very first thing I learned in doing my presentations is that kids have little or no concept of time, especially the young kids. I'm in character in one festival, and this kid that was about 8 years old said, "Are you Frederick Douglass?" And I realized that he thought I was Frederick Douglass. Frederick, the real guy. And I had to figure out how to answer the question, because I told him I was just in uniform, and that just sort of went over his
And
head.
without breaking character too much, and yes.
And then the other thing is just the idea that when you talk about these adult concepts, things like racism, inhumanity, cruelty, all that, those are really adult issues that kids don't necessarily care about yet. They start to in high school. But in junior school, all you're doing is inflaming some passions that they don't understand.
Right.
And they see that's a white boy over there, you know, and they want to start a fight, you know. So my question is, how do you approach that? Because that's generally going to be the nature of the resistance that you're going to get from people that don't want you to talk about it at all. So I was just wondering, what do you all think about that?
Yeah. I would say that resource from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I can share that with you if you're interested. One of the most powerful things that's a tool for that I think in my 14 years in the classroom that I remember kind of being using truthfully, probably without being as conscious of it as you know I should be, but I knew that I had to approach it, especially in one of the schools where I taught pretty delicately. And that was not here, but the Southern Poverty Law Center really leans on the model of inquiry style of teaching, where, you know, provide facts, again, thinking about how age appropriate some of those facts can be, right? Because as you said, there are ages where developmentally, outside of myself, I have little ability, like it takes time to develop those facts and make that conclusion. Your story about the child wanting to know if you were Frederick Douglass, right? Even though you probably said, you know, he lived in these years. That's really similar in my head to what you learn sort of pedagogically about, like, there's the Piaget experiment about, like, does the student really understand that this glass of water won't fit in this glass of water, even though they can tell you that this one is more full, right? But this glass is smaller. That sort of transfer of concepts. And so a lot of the ways that we sort of approach that with students is putting those facts out there and then asking them to ask questions about it, that model of inquiry teaching, you know. And so maybe in that case saying, like, well, do you think, you know, not, and I was a high school teacher, so I always have to gauge my sarcasm monitor, okay? But you know, saying to them, like, well, I don't know. Let's see. Let's figure this out. Am I Frederick Douglass? Frederick Douglass lived in these years. If I tell you that, you know, and then that can lead into, but why is it important for me to come here and act like Frederick Douglass? And sort of have them build experience through asking questions. That would be just, if you're asking sort of for approaches, sort of one model that I think we really tried to employ in these lessons and that I've seen work in real time in the classroom, especially when dealing with, you know, hard history, and it's one that I know is embraced by the Southern Poverty Law Center as well. Is that helpful at all? Is that?
Parrish just wants to add. I know you do, Mr. Parrish.
I want to say and respond to what you were saying. In my years of teaching, I found out in my classroom the reason why kids don't respond, never been taught. The parents don't tell kids what's going on.
Yes.
And black kids especially, the reason why they don't know nothing about the emancipation because their parents didn't say nothing about it. So I had a beard, and a lot of kids used to ask me, was I Frederick Douglass? I said, no. Then I found out, too, they don't understand time.
Well, I got a trick for that one. It works with elementary school kids. I just say, I might say, how many grandparents say kids say, I'm not old enough to be a grandmama. Okay, how old is the oldest? How old should a grandmama be? nice round number is 50 years old. Everybody can say, okay, 50, all right. But if I say somebody's grandmama's grandmama, well, that's 100 years. Somebody's grandmama's grandmama's grandmama, that's 150 years. So that gives them a number that they can understand. And then I say, then I give them an illustration. I say, well, did they have telephones back then? And they say, no. I say, well, did they have airplanes? No, because it depends on how old they are. But you have to start out first letting them know that absolutely nothing that you discuss about this time has anything to do with them. That's the point. For them not to feel like they're part of the horror that you're about to tell them about. And then when they see it's apart from them, then you can talk about it. And so if I have a group of kids and I'm trying to explain what happened in the Civil War, I say, okay, you're gonna be a slave master, you're gonna be a slave, and you're gonna be a carpenter. It doesn't matter if it's a girl or a boy or whatever, because, they just play at it. And, so you just sort of detach them from the situation. That's the way I do it, and it tends to work.
Good
Could
points.
I
Thank
add,
you.
could I add on to that also?
I'm getting to you. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
What I found is our kids need to have pictorials along with the words, along with the timelines to show, to give that historical context to whatever you're doing. The pictures, the enactments that you can tie in with the pictures, show them what timelines are, break them into groups so they can discuss what they know, okay? I would always do like a word chart kind of thing, okay? We're talking about emancipation. What does it mean? What does it mean? Put you in a group, okay? And you have these various groups where you're going to come up with different words. And then you put those words up there. And then what you start doing is building with those words, tie the pictures in with the words. And here again, if you can do enactments, the more our children can get involved and actually experience and see. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, and they're talking to each other also. Well, what do you know? My grandma said so-and-so. Well, my daddy did. And it builds, and that's what you want to do, because once you build their confidence, they start sharing more information. And that's really what it's about, getting that information out there. And then there's somebody in the group that really does know something, okay? Maybe might not say anything about it, but if you get them talking, okay, and tying into, they have a tendency to add even more. And we just continue to build and build and build. But it is about learning.
Very good.
It is.
I have two people over here, and then Ms. Nicholson, I'll get to you. Ma'am?
I just wanted to add to that, but if he has an addition to that too, that's fine.
Oh, no, I have a different.
You have a totally different question? Okay.
I was just going to say, and don't let your fear of how the students are going to respond hinder you from teaching them, because children are sponges. They are natural thinkers, so they want to know more about things, and so we just don't give them the information. When they have it, they'll understand. It just might take time, and like she said, timeline, for them to understand the relevance of it. But just teach it. Just go ahead and explain it and talk to them about it. Have conversations with them, because they'll get it.
It was a difficult conversation.
Thank you. So, okay. There was a moment where you're talking about the themes in Southern literature, and you had like 10 or 11. I wanted to know, and I guess ask, because there's a lot of literature teachers here, if there's of land, manners, family, community, religion, violence, history, foodways, oral traditions, folk culture, and race, there's like a top 3 that you think, because like I shouldn't say that, but like I'm trying to create writing workshops for Spady Museum where we teach high schoolers, teach middle schoolers about the history of African Americans and about what's going on, about the history since emancipation. And in specifically, I guess, high schoolers, is there a top 3, 4, or 5 of those themes that you think are maybe more impactful than the others towards just high schoolers or towards grade schoolers in general?
And you know, what you're asking is interesting for many reasons. And in teaching, if I taught this 15 years ago, the community of students we're teaching to today, and their access even to some issues that have occurred around them, they're bringing a totally different understanding, which is why I'd say George Floyd, which would move history and race, okay, to the top of the list. It depends on the community and the time.
What is actually
Right, what is going on and what is of interest to students at that moment. And, you know, with it, this is what I stated, text and context. I said, students, you know how to read. You know, I don't want this to be an issue of just calling words. You know, we want to understand historically, you know, what is inspiring, you know, what's going on socially, you know, culturally, you know, in this piece. And, you know, at the end of the day, these are human beings. And they're trying to express what it signifies to be human. How do you share that here? How do you share it? And, ooh, this is hard. I know students love oral tradition, okay? They love foodways, of course. But again, there's recently that, you know, with these issues, race, and I'm just thinking back, and the esteemed Dr. Naeem Akbar, you're not going to hide there in that corner, of national and international renown, sitting there, you know, yes, right there. But, you know, again, with the times, the climate, that also determines where you're going to go.
I would like to add to that because in teaching, when I was teaching and taught American history and government and the Constitution and civics, one of the main things that we need to understand is American history. All this other stuff is predicated on the history of the United States, how it started. And we've been giving out some false information. America was founded on religion. No, not so. Columbus discovered America. All this stuff in the book is one thing, and then practical application is something different. Georgia. How was Georgia formed in the first place? All the thugs out of England, rapists, and all them people came. That's how Georgia got started. And so it's just like that today, isn't it? So ain't nothing changed too much. And look what we're trying to do now. We're trying to get our books, Texas, Florida. We're trying to get history out of the books. The whites don't want to know about it. They're talking about it insult white people for us to talk about what happened to us. And they're the one who did it. And yet you're talking about you insulted them. We are the one who's being insulted. And we're talking about this happened and that happened. Well, for his history, the way it's taught, we had nothing to do in America but be a slave. We've done nothing in America. And right now, as we speak, black people are reacting. We are reactionary people. We react to what has already been done. We're sitting here not talking about if if it wouldn't have been for slavery, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about it, would we? So we always react on everything in America. Black staff had to react to what white America has done.
But the strategy has to change.
I usually, like, when I teach, I do agree on that. Usually when I'm teaching, I'll tell people, like, the systems
Yeah,
aren't
has to
broken.
change.
The systems are exactly what they've always been and what they were supposed to do.
We have
They've just been doing it more and more refined as technology's been catching up. And so we have to create counter systems to, frankly, build on top of the systems that are
You
already
have to
there.
rework the
Yeah,
system.
we work them all together.
We have to look at the perspectives that have been rendered and the untruths. We have to speak truth to history. And there are some people that do not want that to happen because that's going to upset the whole apple cart. Well, we are American. Our history is very important because we connect to the world history. Black people, brown people, red people, yellow people have always been there in some form or fashion. Now here we're talking about emancipation, which is predominantly black. But there's even a wider scale to that. And that is one thing, as Americans, we need to really understand. You can't squash me. Maybe you can push me down for a while, and I'm talking black, but you're going to come out this way and come up. The history's there. You cannot deny it. Now, here again, you might try to squelch it, but the history is there, and sometimes it even builds up in you because you're trying to be that which the Lord has made you to be and teach and preach and sing the song of Black America, but American. On my father's back, on my mother's back, grandma. I remember some of those customs too, because my father was born in Florida. My mother was born in Missouri. And some of the traditions that I saw, and I was raised in Iowa, the perspectives that I have seen coming from the north. I taught in Denver, Colorado. The perspectives I saw there, the west, the black west, and then to come from the black west to the deep south. And I tell you, Florida is more deep south, I think, than Mississippi or South Carolina. Only that story has not been told. But I believe this is what this conference is about, bringing the truth out. And we are the ones that have to affect the perspective. We're the ones that have to make the connections. And you can't be afraid of what you see. And if you see the truth, and many of you have to speak it.
I just like to say right now, all of us sitting in here right now, our government is about to be overthrown. We sitting there talking about emancipation, talking about the schools, talking about this. Look what's happening. Look what's happening while we all carrying on. And January the 6th, what happened?
Perspective.
Towards the end.
Yep. And
Okay, I will
that's
say-
another one.
Promise to do something. We have a question.
I mean, I think maybe my question's related, but it is for the school district. I am from Pinellas County, was in Pinellas County School District, recently decided not to be anymore, but My question for you is how you are fighting against local pressure. Maybe you don't have the local pressure about this intentionality in your work to actually include Black history. Are you dealing with that at school board meetings? What are you doing as a district to,
Before you talk, I want to bring up something, Susan, if I might.
Sure.
So you talked about, is it coming to school board meetings and different things of that nature? Years ago, and there was a group that came to the school board and talked about what are we doing with American history? How do you know it's being taught? As a former educator myself, and also as a former school-based administrator, teachers have lesson plans, and we review them to make sure that the curriculum is structured, it's building on what they need, so on and so forth. But truth be told, we can't be everywhere every minute, and shouldn't have to be as professionals. So we had a group, I'll make it short so that relevant answers can come, but I want to tell you how we got into pursuing the African American history exemplar status. We had the public come and say, we don't feel that our kids are being taught African American history. Okay, it has been in state statutes, just like Holocaust education, Native American education. I can go on and on and on, everything that's in the statutes. We had a group that came, and they continued to come. That was under another superintendent. And so he asked us, at that time I was in teaching and learning, he asked us, that superintendent, which is Jackie Pons, what are we going to do about it? And that was our solution, and we continue to build upon that. So we did have people come to the school board years ago to ask about it.
I do want to say, in my case, I was working in the equity excellence work, and a lot of that comes from community funding. But then here we are in 2021, and it's just a very different type of community funding.
Yes.
So even though we have all this, like the law, we have the,
Yes.
we have the support, we have I guess a district statute of how we're going to try to close gaps. It's like now they're changing the name of the equity department just because these people are, associating all the things with CRT, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just curious if there's an example of a district that isn't like trying to hide the work that we morally should be doing.
Correct.
I would say that in my world, which is, professional learning and curriculum, the biggest thing and the biggest piece of work I feel that we have to do is to make sure that we as a county, as instructors, as teachers, those of us engaging in the actual job of the academics, that we're unified and we understand the purpose of lessons such like these. They're grounded in pedagogical best practice that's research and evidence-based. We don't act alone. We act as a group to develop these things and to make these decisions. For instance, right now we're in the midst of ELA textbook adoption, and I'm really happy to say that we've made sure that each school in the district is represented in making that decision, because ELA is an area where there have been questions of that nature. And so really, I consider our best sort of remedy to that from any side, from any comment, is to make sure that we've made our intention in bringing what we bring into the classrooms unified and understood as grounded in, like I said, best practice, evidence-based research, pedagogical ways to deliver this information. It's actually aligned to the curriculum that's required to be taught, because anything else that comes after that would, just be sort of, we will always be following that side of what is known to be best for our students. And in addition to that, branching that work out, because even though we are the practitioners in the classrooms and in our schools, I think opportunities like this to engage the community, to make those intentions known beyond just ourselves. We have to align our own intentions internally first, but then beyond that, to engage with the community purposefully in events like this, I failed to mention it actually in my synopsis, but when we did the preview of the Emancipation Day lessons, we actually had Dr. Myers from the Riley House. We had Miss Lee come in, Miss Barnes. We had several outside groups look at these lessons to give us that feedback, because we want to make sure any questions or challenges, things like that come up, that not only are we aligned in our answers, but that we've advocated for those answers in the community proactively. And so I think that's the strategy we're taking, and that I can speak to from the teacher training and curriculum side so far.
Can I just add something as a,
Of course.
like, I am a teacher, but also have a position with the district. That kind of top-down, like, approach that we have with that at the school level, as department head at my school, I'm able to make sure, and we have collegial conversations within our department all the time of what are you doing, how are you doing it, you know, and if there is an issue, we're, at least at my school, we are very good at dealing with that issue or like seeking help. And so in my experience at my school, we haven't, just because of the leadership over the years, we really haven't had like pushback of why are you teaching my kid this, how are you teaching that? But our administration also does a very good job of knowing what we're doing in our classrooms. And so I think the leadership at the district, moving to that leadership at the schools, and even to department heads is really helpful in Leon County, I would say, with that.
I have a question about that. Okay, I think that is excellent, but my question is the implementation the same at all schools? And then, is there something in place to make sure that the implementation, if it's going on over here, that it's going on over there? And if it's not going on over there, why are not the teachers or whoever collaborating with people over here that aren't doing? And there should be some system in place that checks, follows, support, whatever they need. But if, in essence, it is a statute that ABC is supposed to be taught, then ABC should be taught north, south, east, west. And I would just like to know what is Leon County, and I have, here again, worked in Leon County, Jefferson County also, Madison County also.
Yes, ma'am.
What's in place for the state of Florida to be able to implement some things? And then, what is Leon County doing to influence the legislators about education, and in particular, Black history and emancipation?
Wow.
I can,
That's a half day. That's a half day
For a fact, the book.
So
I can start with that, though.
Would you
I
like
can,
to-
yes.
okay.
All the books.
I want to start by acknowledging that you're absolutely right, that no system is perfect.
Right.
And I do want to acknowledge that even though I'm going to give you some answers about how my shop, how we have gone about that work, I want to acknowledge first and foremost that that work isn't done, and that it's,
Far from.
I'm sure it is not perfect, okay? Because I think that's an important piece of this conversation. Our office literally in professional learning is about continuous improvement, and so we do try in that vein. What I could tell you locally for Leon County is that, again, in that collaboration, as you said, it can't just be conversations about the emancipation lessons. It can't be conversations in my world for selecting the ELA textbooks just from one side of town, and it can't view that, just those perspectives. We all have to have input and ownership of each of these pieces. And so by forming these collaborative committees, which make what sometimes has to be very quick work, larger in scope than we have been used to handling, but I think that it's important. And it goes back to some of the previous question. It's so important that even if you have to do it in 2 months, we'll get it done.
A work in progress.
Yes. It may not always be perfect and beautiful in the way it comes
Building.
out.
We're building.
But we'll build over time. And so I think that from our area, that's the biggest influence that we've had collectively so far, is making sure that we're bringing as many people from the different schools to the table. And I want to almost call it, you know, even though it sounds a little more aggressive maybe than I mean it, a refusal to let people not engage.
Right.
You know, like we will go find, like we will go and look for, I know for textbooks, and it was not a refusal to want to engage, but in some cases there were sites where it was like, it was just very busy and it was hard to find representatives and things like that. And so sometimes the question becomes, how can we get you involved to share in this process? Now, Dr. Gale may have some more information about reciprocal push on the legislature, or reciprocal work that we're doing in both directions. I know there's some conversations there, but that's honestly the in-progress answer and response that I can give to you for that. And I think it's something that we've all committed to, because as we've done it, even though, like I said, it's hard work, we've actually realized how much we enjoy it, and we all benefit professionally from those different experiences, you know, so. But that's a great question.
And I wanted to add to that, I think for the first time, I mean, maybe it's a happy, you know, with COVID, if nothing good has come out of COVID, but maybe one happy accident that's come out of it is this Canvas platform. So for the very first time, students across our entire district have access to the content. And we are the creators of the content, with all of our stakeholders involved, from Ms. Barnes and Dr. Myers and people on our team and teachers throughout our district, that for the very first time are able to bring in content that we feel really good about sharing with our students. But you can have the content, but being able to have the children access it is the next piece that I think for the very first time we were able to do that. So I'm proud of that.
I'm going to say this, and then I want to close this out with Dr. Akbar. I sort of whispered in his ear that you've got to say something. I'm going to say this. It's a work in progress. As professional educators, we know what we should be doing. It starts with the heart and wanting to make sure that we are properly informing our kids, our students, our scholars, as I used to call them when I was at James S. Rickers High School in Griffin. Okay? We can't be everywhere. We shouldn't have cameras to say, I want to make sure and check the box, because anybody can check the box. But we want to make sure that they are engaging in the curriculum, being a part of it. We started last year, and it was a heavy lift in addition to everything else that this team was doing. But when I tell you they did it, and we're going to build on it and continue to build on it and build on it. It's not perfect, but I'm proud of what we have done, and more so what we're going to continue to do. Dr. Yes.
One of the pieces, as you mentioned, it's important, is parents now can see, and not that they could before, but there's not, we're not hiding anything, right? Like, you know, this is on Canvas, and you can see
Parents can see.
your child is
That's
learning.
right.
That's the piece too I want us as a district to build on, like communicating, you know, making this available to our families. And so, you know, working on some kind of campaign during this time period where we're inviting parents in, like especially with all of the
Community
different
inflammatory
inflammatory things happening. We're not, this is grounded, evidence-based, you know, text information, all of it. Here it is, let's celebrate. We need to educate our parents as well. They don't
Yes.
know
You
this.
said that, Mr. Bear.
So I just wanted to, you know, make sure y'all knew that we're working on that piece as well, just to really we want this to be an authentic, transparent experience.
I'm glad to hear that Leland County is doing that, because so many years, we even had different books
Yes.
for different schools in this
Yes.
county.
Yeah, that's what she's saying, like,
Well-
The curriculum on one side of town was different from the curriculum on the other side.
And that was
So-
because it was the choice of that school, but now.
It should have been the
looking-
choice of the school. You got a school board elected
Yes,
to
sir.
govern the schools of the district.
Yes, sir.
And yet, they will let different schools do what they want to do.
Yes, sir.
Now,
Dr.
that's why I screwed up.
Dr. Akbar.
Yeah, it is not accidental that I'm not a panelist. I'm trying desperately to keep my mouth shut. However, I appreciate the invitation to at least put a little piece in. The exciting thing about the panel for me, the conversation, is the fact that this is the kind of conversation that has been able to keep my spirit alive, to know that even in this wilderness, there is a voice crying out. And the panelists, the kind of work that you are doing, really gives me hope that in spite of all the realities that we are dealing with, the fact that there are people who are doing things that need to be done in terms of accentuating and actualizing and making real truth, and not alternative facts, not alternative truth, but the truth. And the fact that there's still this strong commitment to the truth. However, I think that it's also very reassuring to understand that you have not become hypnotized into believing that there is no longer a problem. Thank you to the parishes who are very articulate in accentuating this reality that we are living in hell. And you're talking, and I think that the reality of having the conversation we're having is that we have to understand the difficulty and the complexity of trying to sing the songs of Zion in a strange land.
Yes.
And this is a very strange land.
Yes.
And we need to understand that despite the sincerity of our intentions and intent, we are dealing in a reality where, in fact, already in other states are setting a precedent for making it illegal to deal with the truth. And that precedent is being imitated by the legislative leadership in this state, and it is being enhanced and encouraged by a mentality that was set up by 45. And how 45's mentality is pervading this entire society of which we are part. So in order to tell this truth, we are confronting that reality that is in fact destroying this democracy that we love. So we somehow have to, so we are struggling with that. So we are trying to tell this truth in a reality where it is in fact warlike to tell the truth. And we are increasingly going to be seen as provocateurs, as enemies of the state, and we are going to be increasingly seen that as you come with the truth as being somehow anti-realities that is here. And that's just real. And so it's unfortunate because what we end up doing is that in these environments that are so important to keep us kind of living and breathing, we have to understand that this is the only oxygen that's available. And the oxygen is being quickly dissipated. And it can become extremely painful and extremely difficult. And we have to understand how difficult it is, how easy it is to somehow speak to the choir and forget that this is just the choir. And the whole congregation is listening to another sermon. And so let's be encouraged by the other choir members who are saying amen in the choir room. But let's not ever forget the reality that the parishes keep telling us about, that the congregation is listening to another sermon. And I think that being able to see that in every instance of trying to do this, but we have to be committed to continue to do what it is we are trying to do, and that's to tell the story that I think the panelists have done extremely well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really feel like he should have just dropped the mic and we would have been done. Thank you, Dr. Akbar, because it's like there's no way I could let you sit there and not say something.
Right.
Sorry. I just want to take the time, just like Dr. Akbar did, to thank our esteemed panel. We can give them a round of applause. Yes. They are definitely, as you all are, to use your analogy, we are definitely in the choir. We're not backing down. We are not backing down. And we'll continue to build and make sure that our story is told in the community, higher ed, and also in K-12. And what's going to be beautiful about this is I see a new collaboration being formed. We can learn from each other. I took down when, you're going to have something at the university. I'm going to come to what's going on in Monticello. I didn't know. I did not know. I'm right here in Leon County, and I did not know. And I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues and our parents and our board. They're working with us because we answer to them in Leon County Schools. So thank you for your time today, and more importantly, for everything that you do to make sure that the truth is told. Enjoy your day.